that's not good for people. 95% of the way to a parlay that paid out $80,000. I'd already texted my realtor and said, hey, I can get a more expensive house now. And I was thinking, this is the greatest bet I ever made and the greatest day of my life. And then in a flash, it's gone.
Hey everybody, how we doing today? Today I got a very interesting story to share with you. It's not my story for one of the first times ever. It's going to be a story of someone from our community, and his name is Dylan Rollins. Dylan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey Rob, I appreciate it, man. I just want to say a big shout out to what you're doing. I love your content you're putting out. More people need to be talking about the need to stop. I think more guys our age and in our demographic need to be hearing it. And so I really appreciate what you're doing, man. My name's Dylan Rollins, 36 years old, been gambling since I was probably 14 or 15. So plenty of experience we can talk through in the next little bit.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Now, you say you've been gambling for all this time. What was the point at which it started to feel like, hey, maybe I should stop? Maybe I have an issue. Like, was that right away, or was that maybe 10 years in? How did that kind of pan out?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. It started when I was 14 or 15. That's when poker on TV became big. So me and buddies would do it after school almost daily. And that was kind of my gateway into it. You give me about 18 or 19, I got hooked up with some guys that were sports betting, and I found out what over-unders were and spreads were. And that started small and innocent enough, that we were splitting $25 bets that we were calling in with friends. And that obviously progressed like it does for most people into 50s and hundreds and thousands. And I've gotten to the point where I lost $52,000 on a soccer match one day, on a women's soccer match that I couldn't tell you a single person on the field. And so for me, it wasn't right away. Right away, it was fun. It was exciting. It was exhilarating. There was always a rush that you were chasing. And, I've known it probably took me 2 or 3 years to realize, like, hey, I can't seem to stop like other people. I can't seem to turn this off. I can't seem to find interest in other things like other people do. So it took me a couple of years to get to that point, but since then I've had that feeling 1,000 times over. And whether that was, you get started and you stop for a bit, or you're on a downhill slide and can't seem to stop for weeks, months, years at a time. There have been times where I've stopped for 6, 9 months at a time, but it's something that we need to be realistic with. I mean, people struggle with it and probably always will.
No, it's always fascinating to me when people share their stories that there's so many commonalities between them, because you and I probably were gambling on completely different things, but at the end of the day, it's this gradual creep up of, oh shit, I seem to be doing this different than everyone else. And It is fascinating to see how it goes across the board. Now, one thing I wanted to touch on that is serving as basically the elephant in the room here is that when we started this conversation, you didn't say that you had stopped gambling. Now, what does your form of gambling look like at this current moment?
So it's funny you asked that. I was talking to somebody about that this morning. I've placed 4 sports bet this year. I went months without it. Last March Madness wrecked me financially for the 100th time. And, I get to the point where I'm just so mad, disappointed, frustrated that it says, look, it gets me to a place where I can say I'm stepping away. Like, this has just hurt my feelings for the 100th time. I'm tired of being wrong. And so from last March through January of this year, I guess, I didn't touch it. And I didn't touch it personally. We can get into the booking side in a minute, but I still monitor games, scores, lines occasionally. I do my best to stay away from it completely. But when I find boredom in my life, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, I start looking for a rush. Well, I've only got so many things that I consider to be a rush in my life. I have, to get back to your original question, what does my path look like right now? I've taken some really extreme measures to stop myself from gambling. All right, I grew up in a small town in Alabama. I always had a local bank, or at the very least a national branch that I could get to in 5 minutes. As ridiculous as this may sound to some of you, I opened a bank and shifted all of my money into a bank in New York. I live in Alabama. Why did I do that? I did that so that I can't go down the street and pull out $5,000, pull out $10,000. When I get a bonus check from work, it used to be, okay, I got a bonus check. I can gamble 100% of this and be no worse off than I was yesterday when I didn't have it. So, because look, banking's electronic at this point. I just need a routing number and an account number. I don't need access to my cash. Making it that difficult to go get it has really helped create that hiatus for me from March of last year until January of this year. I was up there for Christmas in New York, and I pulled out $15,000 and brought it home with me. And I have self-reported myself for some of the more popular sports betting apps to prevent access to it. I've self-reported at some local casinos within a 2-3 hour drive to keep me out of there. Closest casino that will accept a sports bet from me is a 5.5 hour drive from my house. So I've made it very difficult.
Yeah,
intentionally.
It's interesting. It's really interesting because I have like this 4-step system that I recommend to people when they're trying to quit. And you've done 3 of the 4 things, and you've just described it right there. I won't dive into it too deeply in this video, but I will link it above when this video is published. So anyone that's watching, go ahead and watch that video if you want to learn how to quit gambling. But yes, the 4 steps that I focused on were time, money, access, and then meetings is the 4th. So it's that boredom. What do you do with that time when you're bored? It's limiting your access to the money that will tempt you. And it's doing self-exclusion, self-reporting, as you said, to get yourself away from the temptation. Now, those are all really great things, and you're on a better path for sure than you would have been if you hadn't done them. But you and I had spoken previously, and this is a point that we're going to have to be open with the audience about, that up until recently, you were engaged in the other side of gambling. You were functioning as a bookmaker until very, very recently. Do you want to dive into that? Because it does create some questions that should make for a great conversation.
Absolutely, man. It's, after years and years, honestly, decade at this point of losing eventually, I just had the thought, like, what if I'm on the other side? What if I'm accepting the bets? All my friends that bet are terrible. Eventually they all lose too. What if I just accept them? Can I scratch my itch that way? Can I get my fix and perhaps stay away from it? And so there are websites, offshore websites, where you can pay to manage a website and create accounts for players and settle up locally. And, that the size of that operation ranged from a handful of players to 50 players at times. And, I would try to grow and shrink that business depending on what my time would allow for. But it was done in a way. There are 2 outcomes I've experienced from doing that. And one is I got my fix and I scratched my itch, and it allowed me to step away and not place my own bets because I still had a vested interest in what the players were betting. And it helped me extend my personal hiatus from gambling at the expense of other people, on the backs of innocent people. And honestly, it feels exploitative at times. I'm going to take advantage of your problems so that I can pay my bills. That's the one thing. The second path that I experienced with it is it kept me closer to the game than I should have been. And that was a gateway for me. I could detect patterns of who the worst players were, and when they were on a certain side of a game, it would make me want to go bet the other way because I anticipated losses from the frequent losers. And that would draw me back into a casino to place my own bets, and with varying degrees of success, even if they were wrong. And so the bet that I went to make was correct, and I won X amount. I still find myself in the environment. I'm now in the casino where I have demonstrated time and time again, I don't have the self-control to be in there. So I can easily go in there, bet $10,000 against these losers, win, and think, oh great, just made $9,000, and then go lose $15,000 at the blackjack table. And so, but what the hell have I done? I successfully did what I came here to do, and I'm somehow leaving down $6,000 worried about how to pay my rent, how to pay my mortgage, how to pay, and it's just like, what are you doing? So there are 2 outcomes I experienced with it.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and it's something that a lot of people that are watching, it might have aroused resentment in them to hear you say it. But another question that probably popped into people's minds was, if you're not gambling and you have a good job, like, what was the need to get involved with it at all? You said it scratched your itch. Like, can you describe kind of the thought process of like what you would do more with the money that you made from fielding these bets? Like, was it used to justify continuing?
I don't think I've alluded to it here, but you're right. I mean, I have a corporate America job. I'm suit and tie, and it produces a six-figure income. I have no real need to do this, but it always seemed to satisfy that itch. And I'll divulge some personal information, but I carry child support. I have daughters, and so it was always in my mind. I kind of had this target every month, and I was like, if I can just cover enough bookmaking to pay that child support, then that financial burden is kind of a wash. And I think that's what a lot of people go into gambling for. They think, look, I have delusions of grandeur. I want this money. I want to, I see in the advertisements, people stack up all this money from parlay wins and glitz and glamour. And they go into it chasing a dollar figure, but for what? I don't know, because you don't stop when you're up. So what are you really wanting to do with it? But for me, I always had a goal, and it was interesting as a player. If I had a goal, I would reach it and then continue until I lost it all. And it was like, man, on the ride home, what the hell were you doing, man? You got the 3,000 you went in there for, the 500 at times, the 10,000 sometimes. You got it. Why didn't you stop? And, that as a player, I was always chasing. As a bookmaker, it was there to satisfy boredom, to stay connected to the game, and call some of my extra expenses just a wash. And, frankly, it created a dissonance of like, look, I know gambling's bad for people. I've experienced it myself, but I'm still giving the platform and allowing people to do it through me for my own personal financial gain. And that's a struggle for me, because I really do. At the end of the day, I feel like I'm a man of empathy, and I have a good heart, and I've seen and actually tried to talk some of these guys into quitting. And it feels so weird considering the source. Like, who gets a message from their bookie asking them to stop because they lose too much? That doesn't happen often. But I've been there. I've been the guy on the other side, placing the bets, overextending, chasing in very obvious losing fashion, and nobody said stop. And I don't want that for people, because a clean life, the times of my life where I've been true hiatus from gambling, hands down the best times of my life.
No, I can agree with that for sure. And thank you for sharing that story, because I know, this is something that can create some interesting feelings, some things that might be difficult to discuss, but it's interesting to have this conversation because, I don't think that the major operators are having these thoughts. I don't think they see the guilt that could arise from running a sports book until they've experienced it themselves. So I won't go as far as saying that, every recovering addict should become a bookie, because I don't believe that's a good thing. But at the same time, it offers an interesting perspective. So I was happy to have you on. Now, another point that you wanted to dive into that I think is really interesting is the effect of gambling on the brain. And let's try to tie this back into the bookmaking. Now, when people go and gamble, for those that don't know, it releases dopamine in the brain. Dopamine is this feel-good neurotransmitter where the more you feel, the better you feel. And so a lot of times people will increase their bet size to feel better. And then you can get hooked to that feeling, which becomes an addiction. How did you, as a bookmaker, recognize the point at which someone should be trying to stop? And could you tell that they were functioning on a high?
As a bookmaker, I have very little insight into people's financial background. I don't know if you're fresh out of college working an hourly job. I don't know if you've got an inheritance. On my worst days, I don't care. I know how much you owe me at the end of the week. On the rare occasion, and I mean extremely rare, that I owe you, I know how much I owe you. But let me be clear about this. I think I have two players that are lifetime up on me. So if you think you're going to be up on a casino or up on a book, I'm just telling you, it's a fallacy. But to go back to your original question, I've got guys that have paid me $50,000, and I've got guys that when they lose 100 a week, it all becomes a matter of relativity. And so when these guys lose 100, 150, $200 a week, that's nothing in my mind. However, $200 a week times 4 weeks, you're getting close to $1,000 in a month. And I don't care who you are, $1,000 can cover rent, part of a mortgage, more than a car payment, child support in some cases. I am one of the rare, I think, instances where, I try to be very flexible with people. I ask them, like, hey, do I need to reduce your limits? Do I need to cut you down? Do you need to stop? Do you need a break? I've encouraged people to find something to replace this hobby. That's on my best day because, like I mentioned, I've been there, and I wish nothing more than for people to walk away from this, find something more productive with their life, find something that does some self-improvement. But what I can tell, the guys who are betting and losing consistently and they're chasing, I can see that bet type come in. I can see a change in their behavior. They get down and they start putting in outlandish parlays, thinking that, hey, this may help me catch up. And that's nothing but risk. And you can see when the kind of the frantic mania sets in, the people's bet patterns change because they don't want to settle up on Tuesday for $1,500. You hear these billions of revenue that the major operators are raking in, and $1,500 doesn't sound like much, but to the average Joe who lost $1,500 in a week, that didn't, was counting on next week's paycheck already, and now next week's paycheck is going to the bookie for last week's mistakes, and I get paid once or twice a month, and now I'm 3 or 4 weeks out from my next source of income. That's not good for people. And yeah, you can identify a pattern, and like I said, on my best day I feel that empathy and want people to stop, but my worst day I've got bills too.
What's fascinating about what you just said, and what should be like really alarming for everyone in the country, is that if you're able to detect those patterns just looking at it without any kind of system, that these major operators who claim to not be able to detect those patterns, they say, oh, I had no idea he had a problem. But if you're able to do it with just like your book, they should be able to do it with their $1 trillion industry, right?
I can tell you to that point, Rob, at a time where I'm juggling 20 players, all right, I get a notification, or used to, I would get a notification when a bet is placed. I can tell which player placed the bet based on the bet size, whether it's the favorite or the underdog, whether it's a full game bet or a halftime bet, whether it's a parlay. I mean, from a pattern recognition standpoint, I can tell after you've been playing for 3 or 4 days. So your point about these companies that have the technology and the AI and the pattern spotting software, and what do they do with that information? They target you based on your bet type. They juice up these parlays that may look sexy to you. They advertise these parlays on your social media, which are absolute fantasy land. You're not going to hit a 6 or 7 game parlay, and if you do, you wasted 10 times that amount chasing the one that you hit. You got to set something aside, man. This is a machine that doesn't care about you. And now look at the average Joe in their life. Your buddies don't think it's cool to lose a parlay by one leg. No girl you've ever tried to date or marry is excited to hear about your gambling story. At the end of the day, the loss you're experiencing and you feel like a loser, you look like one to people too. And to bitch about it and moan about it, you become off-putting to people. And I know that because I've done it. They don't care about the story, and it becomes the only thing you talk about. And you'll see these losses affect your social life. People don't want to be around you. They don't answer your calls. They don't answer your texts. They don't hit you back. And it affects you in more ways than you realize.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And that's the exact point I was getting at. So thank you for elaborating on the industry, their technology and whatnot. Now, looking at going back to your recovery, going back to your ability to say that the best parts of your life were when you weren't gambling. Is there even a reality where the bookmaking and the recovery could coexist, or does all of it need to be left behind for you to be happy in your life?
That's a great question. Candidly, I think you wash your hands from all of it, because even when you're bookmaking, there are times it's still stressful. Your biggest players putting in bets that are hitting, and you're doing a great job of staying clean and staying away from it, yet you somehow check your bank account and you owe a few $1,000s this week, and it's through no choice of your own, which goes back to part of our conversation earlier from today, where you want to be right. You got to get away from it completely to be happy. And there's so many things Gamblers get a one-track mind, and that's what consumes them. There are so many things you could find to become interested in terms of self-improvement, exercise, fitness, learn a new language, read a freaking book, you know, improve your social relationships. Find a relationship with a female that's going to be helpful to you, to help build you up. Like, there's so many more productive things for those who have kids. Be a better dad, be a better mom for any female listeners this is affecting. Like, be a better employee. You think things are going wrong in your life and you're a victim of this or that. Like, check out what happens if you invest in yourself for a few months. If you shut this shit down, you walk away from it, you don't look at it, you focus on you, on working out, on eating healthy, on saving money, on finding interest in other people so that you become interesting again. See how that doesn't change your life if you could find yourself 3 to 6 months to walk away from this shit.
No, 100%. It's like going monk mode, like they say, and finding your way towards a life of more delayed gratification. When you had initially told me that you were bookmaking, my reaction as someone that's in recovery was immediately anger. But then I thought about it more, and I thought it felt like a step down, but not a step to abstinence. And in the same way that people try to reduce their gambling, it felt as if you were trading one where you knew for certain you would lose for one where you had the chance to come out on top. And in this conversation, I've developed more empathy for this process. I still believe that the end result should be to leave it all behind, like you said. But, I think that the audience watching this might even have gotten mad already, and maybe they already tuned out. But if they've made it this far into the video, we're seeing that it's a reflection of the problem in itself. And I just wanted to thank you again for sharing that. With that being said, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
So one thing that comes to mind, for those who have ever toyed with the idea of abstinence, all right, you got your feelings hurt. I mean, I can go back over time and point to my 4 longest breaks. I can tell you exactly what games caused them. And it wasn't a dollar figure, and it was a way that they lost, felt so painful that it just felt like I was never going to win. You guys could go back and look at them. The Chiefs were playing the Chargers 3 or 4 years ago, and the Chiefs scored touchdowns on their last 3 possessions to send it to overtime and force the game over. I was 95% of the way to a parlay that paid out $80,000. I'd already texted my realtor and said, "Hey, I can get a more expensive house now." I was thinking, that gets my daughters their own bedroom, and this is the greatest bet I ever made and the greatest day of my life. And then in a flash, it's gone. And it hurt my feelings to the point where I'm like, I don't want to do anything with this. I bet the Falcons in that Super Bowl where they were up 28-3. That shit made me stop for 8 months. So anyway, my point is, you get your feelings hurt, you hit rock bottom, you come to place you want to stop, and you submit yourself to that idea, and you get on Google and you look up rehab. You're going to find 10,000 hits or results for drug and alcohol rehab. You are hard-pressed to find anybody, a counselor, a therapist, a psychiatrist, people don't specialize in gambling addiction or sports betting addiction. The rehab facilities, there are not a ton that offer that. And Rob, I know you've done some work with one out in Arizona. I think y'all are doing great things. There needs to be more of that. But you realize that over the last few years, I think it's something like 37 of the 50 states have legalized gambling. All right, we go look at alcohol's legal in pretty much every state, as far as I'm aware. Well, you can find alcohol rehab, you can find alcohol treatment, but the explosion that's about to take place from young men and women addicted to gambling, where the access has become so simple. From your phone, from your pocket, you can lose your entire paycheck in a matter of seconds. You transfer it to a website, make a bet, it loses what? No harm, no foul for anybody but you. I want to see more facilities open up. I want to see more therapists and counselors specialize in it. I want to see the common man be willing to stand up and put content out like you are, Rob. I think it's outstanding to say, look, I'm not about the glitz and glamour. I'm not selling picks. I'm not advertising parlay wins. I'm not producing this fake lifestyle of rented Lamborghinis and borrowed stacks of money that make people think this life is sexy. It's not sexy because you're going to lose. And you're going to lose your friends and your family and your girlfriend and your wife and time with your kids and your job. And like, what the fuck is the point? There's no good outcome, because any good outcome you derive, you're going to lose. You're going to give it back. So the net is almost always negative. And as we rationalize decisions, we're smart people. We do not want to put ourselves in almost always, situations that always prove to be negative. We wouldn't intentionally do that, yet somehow we allow our subconscious to make us think we got a chance here. Fucking give it up. Just give it up.
Man, it's well said there. And I think that what we're getting at is we're in this lag period between understanding that gambling addiction is fun versus gambling addiction is an addiction. Or gambling is fun, and gambling can become an addiction. And until people begin to experience it themselves or see others around them experiencing it, they're just not going to view it the same way that they view alcohol. And that's the truth, which is in part why I make the content that I make. Now, as a side note, I cannot with a straight face plug the rehab right now, because I'll just be like, and this video is sponsored by the rehab. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, well, Dylan, it's been a really awesome conversation. You hit a lot of major points, and it's really been an interesting lens to view things through as well, because I'm on one side and you were on a very, very opposite side, but both sides can see that it's becoming a problem. With that being said, thank you so much for being here, and I hope that people can learn from your story the way that they are learning from mine.
Rob, thanks for the time, man. I appreciate the platform, and even more so appreciate the content you put out and the work that you're doing, because if you can positively impact one person and change their life, then every ounce of time, energy, and effort you've put into this is worth it. I can step back and say, even though I'm at a point in my journey where I'm doing a much better job of abstaining, there are hundreds of thousands of men coming up behind us that need to hear it. So I got a lot of respect for you. I appreciate it. And from the mouth of a person who, took people's money to pay my own bills, I'm telling you to stop. You're not going to win. Your life is not going to be positive, happy, and productive until you do. And so, Rob, your message to the world is strong, man, and I appreciate you.